The committee will be in order. I'd like to remind the audience that there is no audience participation in the hearing. All are welcome to spectate, but to follow the rules of decorum here in the hearing room. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. And I would, without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses. And I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. Since Hamas's brutal attack on our friend and ally, Israel, on October 7th, we have witnessed a disturbing spike in anti-Semitic violence across our own country. This rampant anti-Semitism is perhaps most prevalent on American college campuses, often funded with billions in taxpayer dollars. Let's be clear, much of what we are seeing transpire on college campuses is not First Amendment protected speech. We are seeing pro-Hamas protesters commit vandalism, destroy university property, set up large encampments, and even in some instances, carry out acts of violence. At the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, protesters defaced a campus building hours before graduation, covering the university's steps in red paint. At Yale University, a Jewish student was surrounded by a mob of protesters and assaulted by a pro-Palestinian demonstrator. He used a Palestinian flag to jab her in the eye. At Columbia University, protesters barricaded themselves in Hamilton Hall, breaking windows and furniture and preventing other students from accessing the building. And I would note that Columbia canceled its main commencement ceremony. I would point out the young man that was asked if he was a Zionist at UCLA and then prohibited from moving to another part of the campus and in a building simply for expressing his view. Unconscionable. In fact, at the height of the protests on Columbia University's campus, one Columbia employee, an Orthodox rabbi, urged Jewish students to avoid campus, suggesting it was no longer safe to remain on university grounds in the face of ongoing protests. Now imagine that. In the United States of America, Jewish students were being told to avoid campus. And it is not just anti-Semitism on college campuses, it is also blatant anti-Americanism. The University of Pennsylvania, Ben Franklin statue is vandalized with the words, "Glory to the martyrs, Intifada until victory." At George Washington University, the statue of George Washington was spray painted with the words, "Genocidal Warmonger University." At the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, protesters replaced the American flag with the Palestinian flag. Unfortunately, the leadership of far too many of these universities has refused to respond with moral clarity as to what is happening. Instead, they've opted to cancel graduation ceremonies and in-person classes to avoid further disruptive demonstrations. The colleges that are failing to rein in these violent protests are actively trampling their Jewish students' civil rights. Keep in mind, these colleges receive billions in funding and subsidies from the federal government. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that President Biden's student debt cancellation, which constitutes a free handout to universities just as much as the borrower, could cost taxpayers up to $1.4 trillion. These colleges cannot have it both ways. They cannot rake in billions in federal dollars in subsidizing students to attend their universities while refusing to protect their Jewish students as they hide behind a false First Amendment argument. Congress has a duty to ensure that these federally funded entities are protecting students and upholding their rights. Thankfully, there are a few universities that have demonstrated strong leadership. University of Florida's President Ben Sasse made it clear that while students have a right to free speech, they do not have a right to take over an entire university, barricade themselves in campus buildings, and disrupt students' commencement. He rightfully stated, quote, "I want all of our students to feel safe. But more important than the subjective feeling, I want our students to be safe." And that is what is critically important here. In my home state, the University of Texas, President Jay Hartzell rightfully refused to let protesters set up an encampment and disrupt campus operations. You might ask, with Jewish students' rights under attack by students, agitators, and DEI bureaucrats, where is the Department of Justice and its crown jewel, the Civil Rights Division? Where is Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark? Instead of taking meaningful action to uphold Jewish students' rights or going to the Columbia campus, like Speaker Mike Johnson did, the former chair of this subcommittee, to condemn the lawlessness, on Monday, Clark delivered Columbia Law School's commencement remarks, making no significant mention of the surge of anti-Semitic action on campus, and in fact, lumping it into a long train of items in his speech. Imagine that. Didn't even bring it up in any significance after Columbia had basically been sacked in protest. All while the Civil Rights Division, by the way, is actively trampling on the rights of pro-life Americans to peacefully protest by prosecuting them under the FACE Act. One young woman, a progressive activist, received a sentence of 57 months just this week. All while we haven't heard a word about what, if anything, her division intends to do about this anti-Semitic movement among secular liberals on campuses across this country. But beyond civil rights, Congress must also examine how we should use our power of the purse in Congress to shut off the flow of taxpayer dollars that are going to universities to fuel this radical ideology. We are allowing billions, I think $5 billion alone in FY23 that went to Ivy League institutions. Harvard is sitting on a $50 billion endowment. $50 billion endowment, most of which is tax-free. Penn, $20 billion endowment. Yet we continue to have taxpayer dollars flow to these universities while they are treating our Jewish brothers and sisters as we have seen unfold before our very eyes in recent weeks. The secular left wants to admonish us not to foment culture wars. The best way to do that is for these radical progressive Democrats that infest college campuses and leech off of the public dole and the public debt and the fat cat donors that fuel the endowments. Not to do just that, not to start the culture wars by attacking our Jewish brothers and sisters. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about their experiences with anti-Semitism on college campuses and how we can ensure the safety, security, and equal protection of rights. I now recognize the ranking